With all the recent renaissance of our riverfront over the past couple of decades, the 4th Street corridor off Highway 27 has become our cultural gateway and our modern-day terminal station. Downtown visitors are now able to park their cars and eat and drink and work and play in a pedestrian-friendly environment. Yet, during this sequence on a recent morning, there are no human beings here outside the ones driving vehicles. Our 4th Street corridor functions much better as an exit off Highway 27 than it does as an entrance to our downtown. We need to all ask ourselves, is this the best first impression we have to offer?
This ought to be more of a gateway to downtown from, North Chattanooga, from Nashville, from Birmingham.
For most of our history, visitors to Chattanooga arrived at a grand hall or a terminal station. Our early gateways were elegant spaces. Union Depot, constructed by the Cincinnati Southern Railroad for $38,000 in 1882, had an entrance of double walnut doors, a general waiting room, a baggage room, a dining room, 16-foot ceilings, and walnut, pine, and ash interiors. The terminal station, now known as the Chattanooga Choo Choo, won a design prize from the Beaux-Arts Institute in Paris in 1909. These grand places gave Chattanooga its worldwide notoriety and a song to boot. But over the course of a century, we've collectively forgotten our good graces and have opted for quick, easy, automobile-related public spaces to welcome our guests. The 4th Street corridor is basically a 3-block-long decel lane from Highway 127, not an elegant urban gateway. We've forgotten the simplest of connections, those of human scale and a notion of overall balance between ourselves and the world we drive by. We focus considerable attention on our city's riverfront porch, and now it's time to address the real comfort of our living room, the place we welcome guests. From steamboats to railroads to highways, our brand is synonymous with locomotion.
Chattanooga's historically been a railroad town, right? We think of trains and rail lines as making the city, but what we sometimes forget, because it is such a part of how we live today, is that transformation from a railroad town to an automobile town was a very conscious thing, and it changed the face of the city. It changed the way that we all relate to each other, the ways that we think about community, and the ways that we live.
Chattanooga's first bridge across the Tennessee River was a temporary military pontoon bridge. The Federal Army built this bridge in the fall of 1863, but it washed out in November of that year. Matthew Brady took this stunning image of federal engineers constructing a bridge across the Tennessee River in March of 1864, from the North Shore looking southwest to Cameron Hill in the distance. This wooden bridge contained 11 spans that included a drawbridge, and it too was washed away in one of Chattanooga's worst floods in March of 1867. Because of these early engineering feats, Chattanooga's riverfront began to thrive. Western and Atlantic Railroad and L&N operations had an early generation of impact in the city and the region from the 1840s. Transportation has always been the connection of our city to our region. Here we can view photos of our district in 1865, looking east near Market and 3rd Street. Our downtown is beginning to take shape along Market Street, surrounded by a mix of scattered estate homes and small, low-density dwellings. In this 1880 photo, we can see the 3-story masonry building at 4th and Market Streets, serving as a custom house and a city court. We'll return to this site later. In 1880, the Cincinnati Southern Railroad built a new line from Cincinnati to Chattanooga along a route that is nearly identical to Highway 127 today. Edward Ferguson, CSR president, said in a speech celebrating the railroad's completion, quote, "Although it's been built to serve the purpose of trade, it will have a higher and a nobler use. Those who have been strangers will become neighbors. New ties, not of interest alone, but of affection will be created, and sectional antipathy will give place to a feeling of love for a common country and its institutions." This early map shows that downtown continued to develop on a north-south commercial spine along Market Street with about 4 to 5 blocks of housing to the west at the foot of the high hillside, as Cameron Hill was then called. These residential streets, what our team calls the tree streets, Chestnut, Pine, Poplar, and Cedar, are filling in as neighborhoods. By 1886, the tree streets had become a built-out neighborhood butting up to the Broad Street commercial district. Take note of our population at that time, 30,000 people. We are becoming a small city. This photo from 1889 shows the City Street Railway Company's stable, located at the southwestern corner of 3rd and Market Streets. At this time, the Chattanooga Street Railway operated over 55 miles of trolleys, or early mass transit system, which connected all citizens to every primary neighborhood and commercial activity in town. At this time, the tree streets become increasingly dense by the turn of the century. This photo from 1901 depicts the anchor building on the southeastern corner of 4th and Market. Built in 1849, this 3-story brick building stood for nearly 90 years and served several uses: a hospital, a military armory, a prison by both sides during the Civil War, a courthouse, and then finally as our city hall and police station. This is what good buildings do. They are built to last and adapt to various uses over time. This photo is interesting because we can see the electric trolley in service on 4th Street as early as 1890. This 1901 Sanborn map shows a growing commercial core along Market Street and housing immediately surrounding to the west. Light red highlights commercial activity and blue highlights dwellings. If you look closely, you can see row houses at the corner of 4th and Broad. The upper right is the Chattanooga Electric Railway building. The tree streets of Chestnut, Pine, Poplar, and Cedar have a residential density now similar to present-day St. Elmo or present-day Fort Wood. By 1900, we see the emergence of several very large industries located between 3rd Street and Water Street, north and south, and Market and Broad Streets, east and west. This picture, taken from Cameron Hill, shows the Chattanooga Breweries Company's large smokestack looming on the lower right. In the foreground, the hillside continues to fill in with a varying scale of detached residential dwellings. The 1917 Sanborn mapping depicts further expansion of both the commercial core and the residential district to the west. The new structures west of Broad Street are primarily public service structures, such as churches and schools. The Chestnut Street School stood at the southeastern corner of 4th and Chestnut Streets. Automobile filling stations have arrived. There is a new car yard by the ever-expanding Chattanooga Railway and Light building along 3rd between Broad and Market. The tree streets are still completely residential. This 1910 panorama shows 4th Street prominently on the right side with the barrel-vaulted roof of the Armory building at 4th and Broad. The residential neighborhood is moving up the hillside. Postcards from the same era depict the Dynamo of Dixie from the same vantage point, and they too emphasize this long linear commercial core surrounded by housing. The housing along the tree streets was a mix of large single-family homes, small workforce detached dwellings, and small quad apartment flats. This area was known as the East Terrace and was one of Chattanooga's first true mixed-income urban neighborhoods. In 1917, we can find everything from the small one-bedroom apartment to large estate homes reminiscent of the Fort Wood area. These kinds of neighborhoods still exist as small remnants in most all of our older urban neighborhoods in Chattanooga. By 1955, our town has grown to 150,000 people. The commercial district expanded west to Chestnut Street and beyond. Larger homes are removed for apartment blocks, and some dwellings are converted to live-work estates like the one at 5th and Cedar. The Tree Street still had a significant amount of 24-hour residential activity. So let's back out to understand how our entire city looked in 1951. A vibrant commercial core consisting primarily of 2 streets, Market and Broad, completely surrounded by tree-lined residential streets. Over the next decade, we once again radically changed our downtown in the name of transportation mobility. The US 27 corridor that had been in the planning stages as early as the 1920s was put into motion. The Gateway project cleared 403 acres west of Chestnut Street from the Tennessee River through our district all the way to Main Street. Over 2,700 dwelling units were demolished and nearly 1,500 families were relocated. Our downtown was cut in half. The tree streets were obliterated under the new road bed. So this single act forever altered the lives of thousands of residents in this district during the 1950s and created our 4th Street corridor as we now know it. Just in case you happen to fall asleep in the last century, let's take a quick look at the transformation of Sanborn maps in a figured ground format. 1901, 1917, 1955, and lastly, the clearing created by the highway. So from these enormous, sweeping infrastructure transformations, we've tipped the balance between public good and private interest right at our city's front door. No single project has ever had a more profound impact on our downtown than the building of this gateway. No single project ever.
Interesting place, schools and shops and African American community, white community, all mixed right there together and in a very convenient location to downtown. I mean, you know, you're looking at a very easily walkable space when you're looking at, say, 1920s, 1930s West Side, and that's really what we're talking about, because the transformation that takes place over there is a result of trying to remake the West Side in the 1950s and the early 1960s, and it's part of the urban fabric that basically gets ripped out of Chattanooga. It turns the place into, and this is not unique in Chattanooga, it's something that happens all across the United States, is that these urban renewal projects that take place in the 1950s and 1960s, as people are trying, as government leaders and some civic leaders are trying to remake cities, they're remaking them for automobiles. They're remaking them for cars and not walkable spaces and not livable spaces. And I think we're seeing the results of that today.